If I were to sell 100 cars in a month, this is exactly how I'd go about it. This would be my step-by-step game plan, right? And I've sold over 40 cars in a month before, right? And I've made over 30 grand in a month before. I've showed the pay stubs, right? But when I did it, right, I did it basically alone, right? I didn't have any team. I was basically a one-man show. And if I were to go and gun to sell 100 cars in a month now, this is what I would basically do different. I've worked with people that have sold 100 cars in a month, right? I've made observations, and I've really broken it down into 4 key factors from my observations that you need to really pay close attention to if you want to accomplish this goal, right? And once again, this is only if you're gunning for 100 cars a month. I know some of you are probably watching this and saying, you know, I don't care about the 100 cars a month, right? I care about the commission. Listen, me too, right? I care more about the commission than the big number at the top. But this is only if you want that title. If I were to go after, you know, the title of being a 100 car a month guy, this would be my exact step-by-step game plan to accomplish this goal, right? So number 1, and it starts with this. This would be by far, you know, the best place to start for you to accomplish this goal. It starts with your product, right? So what are you actually selling, right? And from my experience, the people that I've seen that are selling 100 cars a month or more, if I were to choose, I would basically boil it down to 2 products, right? It would be Toyota or Honda. So once again, if you're watching this and you work at a luxury car dealership, for example, right, you're probably not going to sell 100 cars in a month, right? But you probably are going to make the same amount of money as the person that is selling 100 cars in a month if you were to probably sell half the cars or whatever the case may be, right? So once again, this is only if I were to gun and go for 100 cars in a month. So why Toyota or Honda? Well, dealerships are basically broken down into 2 spectrums, right? I know it's much more nuanced than this. There are stores that are in between, but it basically comes down to volume dealerships, right? And it comes down to gross dealerships, right? So you have some stores that optimize to sell as much volume as possible, and you have other stores that optimize to make as much gross as possible. And you got a lot of stores in between that are basically both, they claim to be both volume and, you know, gross stores, right? But if I was to go after 100 cars, which, you know, is volume, I would try to get as close to the volume, you know, part of the spectrum as possible, right? And the brands that are really, you know, known for being more so volume dealerships are going to be those affordable, economical brands, right? Like the Toyotas and Hondas. Those are by far, I would say, the most 2 popular economical brands. These are the brands that typically are volume dealerships where they have a very loyal fan base, a customer base, loyalty, all that good stuff, right? So if I were to start and gun for this 100 car a month goal, it would definitely start with the product, and the product that I would choose would either be a Toyota brand or a Honda brand. So number 2, the second most important key factor that I pay very close attention to, right? And you need to pay attention to all 4 of these factors if you were to go after this goal, right? The second would be my actual lead machine. So how am I actually getting customers, right? Which is very important, right? Because if you don't have a way for you to consistently get customers, then you're never going to be able to, you know, get to 100 cars in a month. And I have my way of that I would do it, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But, you know, this is where the unfair advantage kind of comes in for the people that I've seen that are selling 100 cars in a month, right? If you ever worked with anyone that's selling 100 cars in a month, you typically know they've probably been in the industry at least 20 years, right? They've been selling cars for a very long time. So over time, they've built up this big customer base. They've built up, you know, this big loyal audience that's local to them, that these people are constantly repeating buying cars again. If they've been in the business 20 years, they've probably sold, you know, cars to one person on average, maybe 4 or 5 times or whatever the case may be, right? Or even more, right? And these people are constantly sending referrals. So they have that unfair advantage, which is fine, right? Because if my goal is to come in and sell 100 cars in a month, I'm not trying to wait 20 years, right? So what would I do personally for me to accomplish this? What would be my lead machine? Well, I'll do what I basically was already doing to sell the 30 to 40 cars in a month. I'd just be much more smarter about it with my entire process, which is what we're going to cover here, right? So for me personally, you know, I did a lot of marketing on social media, right? That's my unfair advantage. This is how I came into the industry. And in the first year and 2 years, you know, I was able to sell 30 to 40 cars, right? It's because I was leveraging social media, right? I was building my own personal brand. I had customers coming into the dealership specifically for me, which is almost similar to the way that they got customers, right? It just took them a little longer, right? Customers are coming into the dealership for these people, right, that are selling 100 cars a month specifically for them. If you've worked with anybody that sells that many cars, you know you don't see these people outside. You never see them outside. You barely even see them working, right? You always just see somehow they got all these cars being sold. They barely move for their office. And it all comes down to this entire process right here, which we're going to talk about, right? But for me, I would go about running probably meta ads and combining that with like organic content for me to build my brand, but then I would use ads to get attention. So let's just do some quick math. My lead machine, my traffic choice of source, let's just call it Meta, right? It would boil down to Meta for the most part. I would also, have my own CRM where I can automate a lot of the following up and things of that nature so I can systemize my lead machine and my lead process. So I'd probably have my own CRM. And then I'd create a referral flywheel. So every customer that I sell have some type of process to where they would be incentivized to send me referrals as well, right? So let's just call it that, referral flywheel. If you were to sell 100 cars in a month, bare minimum, right, I would negotiate for me to at least be making $500 per car. Plus, if you work at a Toyota Honda, you're also going to get, like, especially with Toyota, they call it spins, right? So you got a card, every new car you sell, you also get some additional money on top of that, right? So I would say bare minimum, if you're selling 100 cars in a month, you're probably going to make somewhere around $60K in a month. Right? That's going to be including your spins, that's going to be including your commission and any bonuses that you have for hitting this unit. So for me to accomplish this goal of 100 cars a month, and if I'm using this as my main lead source, right, like say I'm running meta ads, right, I would need an ad budget. Now for me, my personal experience, it costs me somewhere typically anywhere from $100 to $150 for me to make a sale. Me personally, with my experience, my sales skills. Now if you're a better salesperson than me, then it probably can cost you even less, right? Less to make a sale. But my average cost per sale is typically, so it's going to put cost per sale. That's what that stands for. It's typically about $100 to $150. So as crazy as this may sound, I would need to spend about 10 to 15K in a month. Like I said, this might sound crazy to some of you, right? But I mean, if I'm trying to go for 100 cars and if I'm making 60 grand in a month, then for me, it would definitely make sense to do it, right? Especially if I have my entire process down pat, which is, very important for us to do, which is what we're going to talk about. You have to optimize for this to be able to work, right? 10 to 15. Now, once again, this is only if I'm going for 100 cars in a month, right? Then I would budget anywhere from 10 to 15K in ad spend, right? At $100 to $150 cost per sale. That should give me, if my process is in place, that should get me to 100 cars. Now, let's jump into number 3. And I think this is definitely the biggest separator. This is where a lot of people don't put, time and attention to, but this is where I see the biggest leverage point is going to be primarily in this process if you have the first 2 down pat, right? And that's going to be your actual sales process. So your actual sales process, right? And like I said, this is where I see the most leverage in, because everyone in the car business knows, the saying that time kills deals, right? Well, if that is true, then the opposite is also true, right? If time can kill deals, well, time can also make deals, right? So the longer it takes for you to make a car sale, typically they say the less likely it is for, the car sale to go through. You're probably going to be frustrating your buyers. If it's taking you a very long time to go through your sales process, you're killing your deal, right? You're going to lose the customer. Well, if you can speed up, right? And that's what this basically comes down to, right? This sales process, what most people don't optimize for it. And you can do this right now, if you're selling 5 cars a month, if you're selling 10 cars a month, if you're selling 20 or 30. You can optimize this part of your sales process without needing to go for 100 cars, and you can sell more cars, right? By simply understanding speed, right? Because that is very important. And from my observation, the people that are selling 100 cars a month, they have this down pat. And not to say that they're doing it alone, right? They obviously have help, and we're going to talk about that, but that is very important, right? It's the speed, right? Time can kill deals, but it can also make deals. So for this stage right here, I would say there's a few optional things that you probably are going to need. You don't need them, right? Because this is why they're optional. But if you had them, it would make your life a lot easier. And from my observation, a lot of the people that are selling 100 cars a month, this is typically what they have. One, you probably could use an assistant. You're probably going to need your own personal finance manager, right? And these are all things that obviously you're probably not gonna be able to get right now if you're new to the industry. But if you're gunning for this, right? If you talk to your management and they see that you're going after these goals, I'm sure you can negotiate and they can assist you in accomplishing this goal if you're at the right store, right? If they see that you have the potential and the means to, go after 100 cars in a month, then these things are something that they probably are going to do for you. Because from my observation, the people that are selling 100 cars a month, they have these things, right? And they didn't just get them. Obviously, the store had to approve them. And then you're probably going to need your own insurance broker. A lot of times your dealership already has an insurance company that they're working with, and you're probably going to need somebody from that company to be like the person that you go to for the most part. They always have time for you and your deals because you're pushing so much volume. So they're basically reserved for you, right? Your own insurance broker. So let's break this all down as to why this is important, right? Because this is probably the assistance that you're going to actually need on your team for you to be able to have a smooth sales process. But the difference in sales process between the people that are selling 100 cars in a month and like the average car salesperson, from my personal experience, is extremely massive. Because the sale doesn't start when the customer comes into the dealership. This is where a lot of people go wrong, right? This is why I say, you can make improvements to your sales process right now. These people, they have a pre-selection process, right? People are coming into the dealership. They already probably know what car that they're they're going to be buying, right? They do a pre-selection. They're doing a lot of things over the phone and online before the customer comes into the lot. So when they come into the dealership, right, it's not taking 3 hours like the average sale typically says it takes for you to sell a car. Customers are in and out, within maybe an hour, right? And that is extremely crucial for you if your goal is to sell 100 cars in a month. If it still takes you 3 hours, 5 hours for you to sell a car, right, then you're probably not going to get to this goal. And that is one of the biggest mistakes that I made that I would definitely do differently, right, in my sales process, that I would be obsessed with one customer when I had a bunch of people in my pipeline, constantly reaching out, right? I would sell still 30, 40 cars, but I know I could sell a lot more if I had this one part figured out, which is the sales process, which is the speed that it takes for you to sell a car. And this is something that you should be tracking, right? You should be optimizing to shorten the time that it takes for you to sell one car, right? I used to have customers in my DMs waiting for a response while I'm sitting here fighting and working this one car deal for like 5 hours, right? Which is not smart, which is not a good use of my time. If it's taking me that long to sell a car, that's on me, right? That's something in my process is broken, right? I should have had a lot done before the customer even came in. So when they came in, the process was smooth and easy. And if I were to change that one thing and can speed up the time that it takes for me to sell a car, I would have sold a lot more cars than I did with the current amount of volume of customers that I had coming out and reaching out to me. There would be customers, like I said, in my DMs waiting for me to respond, and it would probably take me 4 or 5 hours to get back to them. By the time I get back to them, they're like, nah, I already bought a car, right? So that alone tells me that my process was inefficient, right? And I still sold a decent amount of cars, but this is what I would approve, and this is what the people that sell 100 cars a month have down pat, right? So they have a pre-selection process. We're gonna break this down. So a lot of the customers coming in, especially if you're selling new cars, already know what car they're coming to look at, right? They already basically have done a lot of negotiating, sometimes on the phone, right? Just to make the process smoother. And you're really only gonna be able to pull this off with customers that already know, like, and trust you, right? Which is what we're optimizing for, right? Which is why I said these people have the unfair advantage. They've been in the industry long enough. They have a lot of repeats and they have a lot of referrals. Repeats and referrals have what in common? These people already know, like, and trust you. They're coming to the dealership specifically for you, right? Some already have done business with you, right? They know you're a good salesperson. So you can go through this process, right, much smoother than like you trying to work cold leads, right? So for me, the way I'm doing it and the way I did it was, like I said, by building my own personal brand, right? This was my way of fast tracking that. Customers would see me online, they'd see my content, they'd see my ads, they'd get familiar with my face, they'd be nurtured through the content, and by the time that they reached out to me, they already felt like they knew, like, and trust me. So I can get away, with pulling this off, right? I can get away with, getting a pre-selection in their minds, trying to see what vehicle that they're interested in before they even come in. The next is typically a pre-approval process. Like I said, we're doing everything just to optimize speed, right? So when customers come in, they're not spending time at the dealership. I don't think a lot of you understand how important that is, right? Time management is very important for you if you're trying to sell X amount of cars. Let's think about it this way. We all have 24 hours in a day, right? The same 24 hours. And we all only have a certain amount of working hours in the day that you're actually going to be at the dealership trying to sell cars. Well, if you simply were to lessen the amount of time that it takes for you to sell a car, well, that means that you have more time to sell more cars in the same amount of work time that you already have. And this is why it's very important, right? So the pre-approval process is something that you would do just for you to have everything basically done for the customer before they come in. So now the customer comes into the dealership. If you have your assistant, right, in place, this is where, they can basically have the car pretty much already ready. If you have your finance manager in place, this is where they can have the paperwork ready, or even better, if you have a customer that already trusts you, right, then you could do the e-sign process and basically get all the paperwork done for them before they even come into the dealership. So when they come into the dealership, they're essentially just picking up their car and they're, putting the insurance on it. If you have your insurance broker, you already have the insurance part already figured out. This is how you can do car deals in about an hour, which is what it's going to take for you to get to 100 cars in a month. So we'll just write e-sign, which is not always necessary, but obviously it can just speed up the process, and then insurance, which is where your insurance broker will come into place. And the fourth factor that I'd also pay attention to, which is also one that people slip up on and don't pay much attention, is simple. It's just the delivery process. So in this stage in the process, a lot of the people that are selling 100 cars in a month, they probably have their own porter, right? Somebody that's going to wash the car for them, and somebody that's also going to fill up the car, right? That's going to fill up the tank. So porter is probably another person that you're going to need to have on your team if you, are gunning to go for 100 cars in a month. Like I said, this all comes down to speed. A lot of the tedious tasks that you are doing right now are going to need to be delegated, right? Like putting the car in the wash, like filling up the tank, or like even bringing the car to the front so the customer can do the test drive, whatever the case may be, right? Like I said, the reason why you don't see these people, if you ever worked with any one of them that's, sold 100 cars in a month, the reason why you don't really even see them is because most of their time is spent on the phone, talking to customers, negotiating and basically closing deals and basically selling. Most of their time is focused on doing the one thing that they're actually getting paid to do. It's just sell, right? A lot of the other tedious tasks around the job of selling, right, is basically outsourced and delegated. Like the paperwork, like the insurance, like the test drives, like the bringing the car to the wash. To sum everything up, like I said, in order for you to get to 100 cars in a month, first it starts with the product. You need to be in a store that, closer to the volume side of the spectrum so you can actually be able to sell 100 cars in a month. Then you need a lead machine. Like I said, if you don't have 20 years in the game, if you don't have a big book of business, my personal choice would be, going to building my own personal brand, generating my own leads from social media through Meta for the most part, right? And then your sales process needs to be absolutely dialed in. This is where speed comes into play, right? How long does it take you from start to finish? Everyone that's watching this, you probably should time yourself for the next week. Every customer that you get, right, that you're actually selling, when you bring them to the dealership, time yourself. How long does it take you from the start when they come into the dealership to actually for them driving off the lot? How long does it take you to sell a car? And then you average that out, right? If that number is over 2 to 3 hours, right, you need to start working on chopping that down. Because if you did nothing else, if your lead volume didn't change, the amount of customers that can't reach out to you didn't change, but you can get that number down, right, you'd automatically be able to sell more cars because you just have more time to sell more cars. It's really that simple, right? And it sounds simple, but a lot of people don't focus on it. They don't optimize for it at all, right? Which is, the main thing that you probably should be doing. So how quick is your sales process? Number 4, and then your delivery, right? After the sale is done, how quick can you get the customer out and then focus on the next customer? So this is exactly what I would be focusing on and doing if I was to try to go and sell 100 cars in a month. This would really be where my attention would be in these 4 factors right here. So leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you all want to see next, and I'll see you in the next video.
Glad you made it to the end of the video. I got 2 options for you. You can either watch the next video or you can DM me the word sold on Instagram at Real Corey Burnett. If you're ready to take your car sales career to the next level, I'm looking forward to helping you out. More importantly, looking forward to meeting you. I'll catch you all in the next one. Have a blessed day.